Welcome to the Historic Preservation Commission meeting. It's January 16th, 2014. And unlike, or different than the agenda says, it is actually 2014, so please make a note. We're still in last year on the agenda.
No, we're not.
Oh, no, that was issued to us.
Oh, well.
So.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
I changed the copies.
We fixed it. Could I have roll call, please?
Sure. Commissioner Garpetian.
Here.
Commissioner Morgan.
Here.
Commissioner Shier.
Here.
Tunyon.
Here.
And Commissioner Vidor.
Here.
Thank you, all present.
Great. Item 2 on the agenda. Today is a new year for the commission, so we vote to determine the new commission chair and vice chair. They will serve 1 calendar year each. So do we have any nominations for chair?
I would like to nominate Lorna Vartanian for chair for this year, 2014.
Second.
Okay.
Okay.
Roll call.
Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Commissioner Garpetian.
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian. Oh, Commissioner Vartanian will be the new chair. Commissioner Vidor.
Yes.
And Commissioner Shier.
Yes.
Voted 4-0.
Excellent. And then for vice chair, are there nominations?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Morgan.
I second.
Okay.
Vote please.
Commissioner Vartanian.
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor.
Yes.
Commissioner Garpetian.
Yes.
And Commissioner Shier.
Yes.
Thank you. 0.
Okay, with that, we'll change positions, and Commissioner Vartanian will take over.
I forgot to bring the music that we usually
Yes,
cue for this
that's right.
moment.
The
but,
the trumpet.
next year.
Names.
Oh, yeah. So I'd like to thank my colleagues for your confidence in me. Again, it's been a pleasure serving with all. Now the light doesn't
Dead.
work.
Okay.
Yeah, the light is dead. But I'd really like to thank Commissioner Shier for chairing for the past 2 years and doing such a good job shuttling us through all of our deliberations. I hope I can do half as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I second that.
Second that.
Me too.
Okay, next is the report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on or before Monday, January 13th, 2014, on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Number 4, approval of the minutes of December 16th, 2013. Are there any changes?
And you have some corrected minutes that were on the dais. The Historical Society pointed out some fairly major issues on that, so we thought we wanted to get the corrected version to you for this meeting. But of course, if you have any other corrections, we'll take those also.
So would that be, I didn't get a corrected copy?
Oh, I'm sorry. It would be...
I'm going to guess that was the reference to a speaker under number 7.
Yeah, it was a misplaced
A new
speaker,
business.
as well as the discussion for 1411 North Central. Oh, no, it wasn't that one.
Yes, it was.
That was the one? Yeah, so that had been,
Okay.
there were just some errors there.
Okay.
That everything?
Great.
I have no comments.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move we approve the minutes.
I second.
What?
I second.
Commissioner Vidor.
Yes.
Commissioner Shier.
Yes.
Commissioner Garpetian.
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Madam Chair Vartanian.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, next is oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or discussion. I have one card, Mr. Sean Bursell from the Glendale Historical Society.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Commission, and Happy New Year. First off, let me start by congratulating Madam Chairwoman and Vice Chair Morgan on your election to those positions, and thank Commissioner Shier for her leadership of this commission over the past 2 years. We greatly appreciate it. I wanted to just talk about 3 things tonight. The first is that the Glendale Historical Society is presenting a lecture this evening at 7 p.m. at the Glendale Central Library. And the lecture is titled Glendale Unzipped, and it's about the early history of Glendale. And the presenter is none other than Commissioner Vidor. So I hope those of you up on the dais can join us at 7 p.m. at the Central Library, and those listening at home will also come over and join us for it. I have not heard this presentation before, so I'm really looking forward to it. I hear it's really excellent, so I hope people will join us. The second thing is we have distributed to you an article from the most recent Los Angeles Conservancy News, and the article is titled Hidden in Plain Sight, Our Everyday Heritage by Adrian Scott Fine, who is the preservation advocate for the Conservancy. I thought this was an excellent article about those everyday places that are in our communities that we just go by all the time and we don't really pay much attention to, but they contribute to the fabric of the community, and many of them are worthy of preservation. Now, obviously, not everything is worthy of preservation, but there are some iconic structures, and just because they happen to be a supermarket or a drugstore or something like that doesn't mean it's not worthy of preservation. And this article talks about the challenges and the attitudes that many people have and how to overcome those when dealing with the preservation of those, as I say, everyday structures. So I recommend it to you. I thought it was really excellent. The final thing I just wanted to mention, and it goes to this conversation Commissioner Morgan and I had a few months back about historic preservation is not just about structures or places, it's about people and stories and that make up our communities. And I just wanted to let you know that today is an important day because it's the 150th birthday of Piedad Yorba Sol, who, as I think everyone up on the dais knows, was the proprietor of the Casa Verdugo restaurants here in Glendale from 1905 to the mid-1930s. She was born on this day in 1864. She lived until 1948. Now, Mrs. Sol, she ran the Casa Verdugo restaurants, and she popularized California Spanish food. She contributed to the romantic Romana mythology of Southern California, and she created a major tourist attraction right here in what is now Glendale, and in the process introduced Glendale to the Los Angeles and indeed the nation. So I just wanted to point that out because I think it's important to keep in mind the stories of the people who created our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think on that note, I'll just say that I know you did a lot of research on Piedad for the Casa Verdugo home tour sponsored by TGHS last fall. So I know that's something that you're very close to. Thank you for that. Okay, next on the agenda is comments from commissioners. Any comments?
Yes, I just want to thank the staff for sending us that beautiful Christmas card, and every one of them took the time to sign it for us, and we really appreciate it. And Happy New Year to all of you as well. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I would like to say the same thing. It was a beautiful card and very heart-touching. I've got it on the hearth at my house. It's very nice, and all the individual comments were thrilling, to tell you the truth. The people had taken the time to respond was excellent. And I would just like to, for adjournment, maybe today we could do it for Piedad.
Oh.
On her 150th birthday. Maybe we could also sing happy birthday to her. So.
In Spanish? Okay, we'd be happy to do that. Anything else?
And I'll share your thoughts with staff. I think they'll appreciate hearing that there's a warm reception for something like that, because
that was well appreciated.
Everyone enjoys working with our commissioners and boards. So.
Thank you. Okay, number 7 is old business. Proposed Brockmont Park Historic District review of petition requesting designation of Historic District Overlay Zone.
Okay, I'll briefly introduce this and just share with the Commission this is the third to last step in our historic designation process. Brockmont Park has had the longest kind of designation for a variety of reasons. but they are here with their petition asking that the commission move this forward in the process. And as the commission knows, now that we've gone through this on many occasions at this point, the Historic District Ordinance establishes a set of what some might call hurdles, but we call opportunities to prove that you really are a district and that people who live within the proposed district want this area to be considered as such. And at every step of the way, this beautiful neighborhood has passed the hurdles. So in terms of the staff report, we just want to remind the commission that 7 months ago you reviewed the Historic Resources Survey that indicated that the properties within the district, when we look at them in terms of whether they're contributors to the character of the district or non-contributors, contained 88% contributors out of the 59 homes in the proposed district. And the Historic Resource Survey also found that 4 of the 9 criteria for designation were met, and that is above the requirement that 1 criterion be met. So at that point, you authorize that the proponents of the district circulate a petition among their neighbors, and what we look for on the petition is to make sure that the people who sign the petition are the owners of the property, and that when there are multiple owners of the property, all owners of the property have signed. So at the staff level, we kind of review those records, and then we compare them against our county assessor's records of ownership to make sure the names kind of match from one set to the other. And in the case of Brockmont Park, we found, or the number of properties that signed the petition consists of 35 out of the 59 properties, which brings us to 59% of the properties within the proposed district, which exceeds the 50% requirement of the Historic District Ordinance. So at every level, they've met the requirements. The commission does have the ability to, vote to recommend the district to City Council at this point, or to not recommend. Staff's recommendation, of course, is that the commission do recommend because all of the requirements have been met. The situation here is that there will be 2 more hearings. The commission's vote is advisory to the council, as it is for Glendale Register properties. We also have a meeting set for February 5th with the Planning Commission, and because this is officially a zone change, not just a historic district, but we're creating an overlay zone, the Planning Commission has to weigh in on this, and then we will then go to City Council at a date that we haven't determined yet because we have to wait until after the results of the Planning Commission. Because it's a zone change, when we go to council, we'll require a supermajority vote of council, so we'll need 4 out of 5 council votes. And if council does vote for the district, we will have our 6th historic district in place. So that ends the staff report. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
No.
Okay, so I think we can open the public hearing. And I have 2 speakers. The first is Francesca Smith.
The second one is?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I'm Francesca Smith. I figure you all have reviewed your packets each time this has come before you. We very much appreciate your consideration of this item. I'm a professional architectural historian with 28 years of experience in doing this. I've done it all over the country, and I've worked as a regulator and a consultant. We came to Glendale partly because we love this neighborhood so much. It's extraordinary. You all have probably driven by and seen that. The decision to nominate the historic district was made collaboratively with lots of our neighbors all together, and it's empowered our neighborhood a lot. We've gotten to know people. Everyone says hello more. People know each other's names. You know the technical stuff, so I'll skip that stuff, but that has been really fun. And we were really surprised and pleased to see the level of support and enthusiasm that our neighbors expressed. There were certain people who didn't even answer the door ever. You may see that reflected in our number, but we do meet and exceed the number in the ordinance. There was an anonymous backdated letter sent to everyone in the neighborhood. I don't know if you all care. There were a whole bunch of really terrible misstated non-facts. I sent a response immediately. I don't really know if it helped sway people because we had actual empirical backup and data to talk to people, but they had heard, building permits will cost more and things will be harder and it means more government. So that's been a bit of a threshold for us. We're thrilled to have the generous backing of the Glendale Historical Society on this, and as well as majority support from our neighbors. We all look forward to working with you, and we hope you'll recommend this for City Council. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Well, just those that didn't sign on, was there some category of why they didn't?
I have a few categories. There were, I think, 8 houses. I'm trying to think of the percentage. I did the math today. 8 houses said absolutely no, didn't want to talk about it, and we respect that. So I had done the percentages, sorry. There were 4 houses of the 59 who literally would never answer the door. If they answered the door, they just said, not today, or we're not going to talk about it. There were another 8 toward this total who you'll be interested to know, for a variety of reasons, either said maybe, come back later, or one member of the household was in favor, another member wasn't. There were some houses divided. I listened to a lot of fights. Interestingly, there was only one among our 59, but it counts for about 2%, who really is in favor of it, enthusiastic about it, upset about what has happened in the neighborhood, but doesn't believe that our fine city can enforce such a thing.
Oh.
I know, I spent hours. So that was 2% of the group. So that's what put it together. So we really had
20.
8 households of the 59 were entirely against it, and a lot of, come back later, and, I'm going to sign, come back another time, and just strange things, or come back at the end. So that was how it...
So the 8 that did not want to talk about it, you categorized them as negative to the...
Yeah, they were definite,
Okay.
the definite no's. They were definite no's.
And in terms of the ordinance, we don't classify, and it's just the property has signatures or it doesn't.
Right.
And I think, as the commission knows, and we've seen in all the other districts, there are people who just believe that designating historic resources or historic districts is not something that they're ever going to support. So there's a kind of a philosophical decision that's made. And so we would expect that in pretty much any neighborhood anywhere in the city, I would think.
Other questions of the speaker?
No,
Thank you.
And we have one more thing. Are you ready? That's and lots more people will come to farther down the road meetings, but it was hard to say, will you come to 3 now?
I think that's a first. That was very nice. Thank you.
Somebody get a picture of that.
The next
Newspaper.
the next speaker is Sean Bursell.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Commission. I'm Sean Bursell, Executive Director of the Glendale Historical Society, and we strongly support the designation of the Brockmont Park Historic District Overlay Zone. And as you see, there's a number of the homeowners here in support as well. I mean, I don't think we really have to go through all of this again. You know that there's 59 homes, that it's incredibly intact neighborhood. It's a very compact area in terms of the size of the historic district, and it's an incredible variety of styles of homes. The period revival, the eclectic, the minimal traditional, and the ranch, and so it really is. I think it's a lovely little neighborhood, and it's very worthy of designation. And the fact that 88% of the houses, of the homes in there are considered to be contributors, I think that may be the highest that we've ever seen. I'm not quite sure about that, but certainly is
Close. If not the highest,
maybe Cottage Grove, maybe.
Cottage Grove was, yes, Cottage Grove was over 90.
Yeah. And just as a reminder, the threshold is 60%, so this is at 88%. So it meets 4 of the 9 designation criteria established by the city ordinance, and the city ordinance, once again, only requires 1 to be met. So again, it's exceeding what it has to show. And then the fact that you have almost 60% neighborhood support, that is great. And once again, the requirement is 50% plus 1. So they easily exceed that requirement. So by every metric, they meet the criteria for designation, and the Glendale Historical Society strongly urges you to support designation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, we'll close the public hearing. Is there any discussion, or do we have a motion?
I would be thrilled to make a motion if there's no discussion. Yeah.
And a second?
I second.
Motion is?
The motion is to
sorry, yes.
recommend to Planning Division and City Council that the Brockmont Park Historic District be approved.
I second.
Thank you.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Shier,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Enthusiastically, yes.
Commissioner Vidor,
Enthusiastically, yes.
Commissioner Garpetian,
Enthusiastically, yes.
Madam Chair,
And
Vartanian.
enthusiastically, yes.
Thank you. Motion
Thank you all.
passes 5-0.
Good luck. Okay. I think we're going to skip 7B
Okay, we're going to
and
jump to
8
9.
and jump to 9A.
9A.
9A, yeah.
Okay, 9A is a proposal that we're bringing to the Historic Preservation Commission as an informational item. This is for a project that is proposed as a collaboration between the YMCA and a affordable housing company called Meta Housing, in association with the Housing Department, or the Housing Division of Glendale is involved in the project. And it's for a site that's adjacent to the historic YMCA building at the corner of Wilson and Louise. And it's also adjacent to the historic post office building on Broadway. So because this has this level of proximity to 2 of our major designated properties in Glendale, we wanted the commission to have a look at it, not as a design review board, not as an authority to kind of have any binding decision-making over the project, but to offer any thoughts or suggestions you have about whether this project blends with the historic environment, which, if you visited the site or know it, you know it's kind of a complicated site to start with, and also if you just have any specific thoughts that the design team would take into consideration. There are 2 multifamily buildings on the site that's proposed for the new affordable housing, a 4-plex and a small apartment building. And as part of this process, Meta Housing hired Architectural Resources Group to do a study of those 2 properties. We looked at them as potential resources. They've been identified variously in previous surveys as potential historic resources as Glendale Register eligible. They've also been looked at in other surveys as not Glendale Register eligible. So we had mixed results from a series of surveys over the years. The Architectural Resources Group report has just come in. And what's interesting about the project is that it found that both of these properties are not eligible at either the Glendale, California, or federal level. And the basis for that decision was on a very thorough windshield survey of the entire South Glendale area, which basically consists of the area below the 134 freeway down to the end, down to the southern tip of Glendale, looking for comparable properties. And I'll pass this just so you have a look. This hasn't been yet, but it's public information now and will be. What the survey found was that there are many, many fourplexes in Glendale, and that was the building that for most of us looking at these properties, we were kind of, I don't think we have a lot of that. They found many fourplexes, including a number of identical twins to the building on Kenwood that would be demolished as part of this project. The Commission doesn't have any authority over these properties because they've never been designated, but obviously they're of historic interest. We've heard from the Historical Society and the public that, yes, these are older buildings that, we wanted to know more about. In our review of the Architectural Resources Group study, we think it's a very solid survey, and it was kind of a revelation, in fact, to find out how much we have out there, which doesn't mean that all of those buildings will be protected just because we have this study, but this will inform our future, either when we get to a citywide survey or some of our land use decision-making as other projects come up in South Glendale. So ultimately, your discussion today, if you have questions, we'll answer whatever questions you have. But if you can focus specifically on how this building might relate to the YMCA building, and it faces kind of the back corner of the YMCA building, and then it also faces the back of the post office building. So in terms of the presentation, I wanted to first introduce Michelle Coulter Espinoza with Meta Housing, and she will give you a little bit of background and then introduce the project team.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Michelle Espinosa Coulter. Backwards. Oh. That's okay. I am a project manager with Meta Housing Corporation, and we are thrilled to be partnering with the City of LA. And I'm sorry, the City of Glendale. Oh, I knew I'd do that. I do that. The City of Glendale and the YMCA.
Rewind the tape.
Yeah, I knew I'd do it.
I got your name wrong.
That's okay. On this project, we sincerely hope that it affords them ample opportunity to make some of the improvements to space and place that they've been contemplating for some time. The project in question is a artist colony. It's the Glendale Artist Colony. It's the 5th such artist colony that Meta's developed. It's a bit different from our previous iterations in that it is a family project, meaning that there are units from 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, up to 3 bedroom. And it is a project for working artists, meaning that somebody in the household will need to submit a portfolio of their work to a commission of experts to be selected into the project. Glendale Arts Colony has 70 units. It's 100% affordable, meaning that the households there will earn between 30% of the county average income to 60% of the county average income. In addition to the 70 units of housing, it affords ample art space in the form of beautiful, pristine gallery spaces with natural light and all the accoutrements, and to messy art space where people are really supportive in their creative endeavors, all the way up to outdoor art space where people can really work on large projects. With that, I will turn it over to our trusted architect, Michael Bond of Studio 111.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Michael Bond. I'm a principal with Studio 111.
The arrow key to move slides.
Thank you. I did learn something tonight that Piedad and I actually share the same birthday. So,
well, happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm a couple of years younger than her, but I will celebrate and have Mexican food tonight. So.
We'll still adjourn the meeting for you, too.
Thank you. With that, I'll go through the PowerPoint and walk you through the project. The project is the rectangular block in the center there. The ochre building at the bottom is the historic post office. The ochre building at the upper left corner is the historic YMCA, which serves as an SRO and a gymnasium. And there is a pool down in the basement. The white building between the two is the proposed building that we're proposing with the client Meta Housing Corporation. Quickly going through, also, I'll refer to this entire block as the project block because it has these 3 different buildings, and as well as the existing YMCA facility just to the west of our building, and then directly to the north of us is an apartment building. The images at the top are actually the project site. From left to right, you would see the historic post office. There's an alley. It's actually a public alley that bisects or separates the post office and the YMCA site, which has the 2 existing apartment buildings in this image. And then there's a private drive to the right, and beyond that is a apartment building, which is not a part of our scope. And then the image below is Kenwood looking away from the project site, which has from right to left the historic or the Methodist Church, a children's center, and an educational facility. This is a view now looking from Louise. The top one is looking at the site again. We have the historic YMCA to the left. We have a parking lot in between. To the right of that is the current YMCA facility. There's the public alley, and then the post office to the extreme right. And then down below is Louise looking the opposite direction. From left to right, you have a commercial building, then an apartment building, a parking lot, the theaters, and then another parking lot. And then down below is actually a shot looking through the north-south alley, looking at the historic Y. And at the immediate corner, the image in the middle is actually the YMCA building that would be closest to our proposed building. It's about 36 feet high. It's 2 stories, but it's a very tall 2 stories, and it's very boxy in character. And then the image to the left is if you were to walk, say, 50 feet westward, and you get a better sense of the articulation of the building. The building is much taller away from our proposed building, with heights anywhere from 50 to 65 feet. This is now looking through the public alley, the southern public alley. The upper image is the historic post office. It's really kind of the back of the building where the servicing happens, the back of house activities happen, where the loading and unloading of mail occurs. And then on the north side of the alley is the existing YMCA facility on the left, and to the right, the existing apartment buildings that would be demolished. And then down below, the 2 images on the left are just another view looking at the historic post office. And then finally, this is a view on Wilson. The upper image is the building to the right is the historic Y building. The building to the left is the apartment project or development that's not part of our proposed development. And then the images below on Wilson are 2 existing apartment buildings, again, not part of our scope. And so when we looked at this project, we first wanted to really understand the context of this block and everything around it. So we created this diagram which illustrates our intent. We really wanted to push the highest massing of the development towards Kenwood. And so you'll see a couple of orange blocks and then some reddish blocks. And that's really the housing component fronting Kenwood. And we didn't want it to just be one long wall at the same height. We wanted to have articulation in height as well as pushing the building back and frontward towards Kenwood. So we have a taller element, which is the red box at the upper right-hand corner, which is a tower element that you would see from Broadway if you were driving along there and looking up Kenwood. And then we step the next portion of the building back from Kenwood, and then the last red piece closest to us pushes forward again towards Kenwood. And the massing or the width of those pieces relate to the width of the buildings across the street. We wanted to make sure, again, not to overwhelm the redundancy or the consistency of the building across the whole site, but break it into 3 pieces. And you'll see that in the elevations. Looking southward, there's a podium, which is the open shared courtyard for the residents. We hope that'll be an art garden where the artists can display their art. And then there's some additional lower housing of 2 stories in height above the podium, which is about the same height as the existing Y building. And then as you notice between the SRO historic Y and the current Y building, right now it's a parking lot. We're proposing to make it more of a lush parking court that has trees, landscaping, and stitches the 2 Y buildings together through landscape, because architecturally they're very different. They're of different times, different eras, different cultures. But we want the landscaping in there to help stitch those 2 buildings together. And it happens to have cars in it, but the predominant impression for the visitors would be that it is landscaped. At the end of that court, you see a lower red box. That is what Michelle referred to as really a big part of the art component of this facility. At the ground level, there'll be a gallery, and then on the upper 2 floors will be where the messy art occurs. There'll be the art spaces where artists can work together in order to produce the art. And we felt that that building had to scale down to around 55 feet in height. The taller building along Kenwood and is 72 feet, and we wanted it to scale down to relate closer to the height of the existing Y structures. And then we also noticed along Maryland that there are some great paseos that link you to the theater. We're hoping with the blue arrow shown on the right-hand side that a paseo in the future will link to Louise, and then within our parking lot we're proposing a trellis structure that would serve as a paseo that would lead you directly to the gallery itself, so that you, as a visitor, you wouldn't have to walk through the parking lot itself. This is an aerial if you're in a helicopter looking southeast. Again, you can see the taller massing along Kenwood, the museum or the gallery, and the messy art spaces, again, step down to respect the height of the existing Y buildings. And you can see the relationship of the post office as well. There is a large parking lot in between our building and the back of the post office as well. I believe it's about 68 feet from the face of our building to the lower face of the post office. And then this is another view, again, being in a helicopter, looking northwest and the relationship of both YMCA buildings and the post office itself. This is a view if you were just coming off of Broadway heading north on Kenwood, and we wanted the commercial component of the building to be at the ground floor at this corner. We see that as a lobby with a gallery space as well, so that it has more of a commercial component to relate to the activity along Broadway. And then as you move forward or northward along Kenwood, the units take or the ground base of the building takes on more of a loft feel, which has a slight commercial feel but is really residential in character. It would have stoops, terraces where artists could work and engage with the street. And then this is the view from Louise looking eastward. You can see there is parking in here, but we've put a tremendous amount of landscaping in here. We're proposing palms along the edges. We want to respect with the original Y building to put drought-tolerant Mediterranean-style planting and have some of that spill into this courtyard and tie all 3 buildings, which we consciously designed our building as a building of today, so that there are 3 different buildings, all of a different generation, but stitched together by this beautiful landscaped area. And you can also see the terraced walk that leads a pedestrian from Louise to the gallery space at the end of the courtyard there. And then finally, this is a view from Kenwood looking southward, standing at Wilson. And you can see the movement in the building, particularly at the upper floors, how it moves out, it steps back, and then there's the tower element at the southernmost portion, again, to break the scale of the building down, not only by massing, but by color and articulation of materials. And the materials themselves, the tower, we do see that being skinned in a large tile, probably 24 inches by 5 feet. Other parts of the building will have cementitious siding and will be colored in different colors, to break, again, the scale of the building down. At the base of the building, again, would be these loft units. At the southern end would be the lobby, gallery, and the leasing offices. And then as you move forward on that elevation are the loft units. And then down below is, again, the elevation looking towards the parking court. You can see the gallery with the messy workshops up above. And then you can see the scale of the building steps down with the yellow ochre-colored portion of the building relating to the height of the existing YMCA building. And then the upper image here is the north elevation. We changed the color, again, to distinguish the building into a collection of 3 forms. And then the bottom image is the view towards the post office with the taller portion of the building closest to Kenwood and then stepping down dramatically to about 22 feet high as you get closer to the center of the post office, which is behind us. And then this is a site plan. The historic Y is at the upper left corner. I can't read the number here, but I believe it's about 34 feet from the lower part of our building, which has the gallery and the art spaces. And then if you look at the dimension on the screen below at the public alley, our building is about 68 feet away from the post office itself. And then from a landscape perspective, these are just concept drawings, but again, showing the idea of taking that parking lot right now and putting some large canopy trees in, installing some palm trees, and introducing grasses and other more native planting in there to make it a more attractive space, landscaping around the existing YMCA, the historic YMCA. And then the image to the right is the courtyard where many of the artists will have roll-up doors where they can practice art within their space, open up the roll-up doors, work in terraces that are private in the courtyard, and then hopefully over time putting some of the artwork actually into the courtyard, either up at the podium level or perhaps even in the YMCA parking court. And with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of the speaker.
The types of artists that are coming in, are we talking about work on paper, kilns, sculptural, where there's heavy equipment that's going to be used, what? And when you talk about messy art space, and that can look many different ways, so I'm just curious to understand, in a very densely populated central area. I mean, I love art, so I'm not against conceptually, but just what exactly does working artist look, multiple working artists working in a residential area look like in terms of the types of art they're practicing and, that type of thing?
With regards to any restrictions on working artists, we have made it a point to not have any restrictions on the working artists, honoring all
Whereas
types
mediums.
of art, all mediums.
So there could be kilns and.
There could be. We do have we have actually a project that already has kilns that's not specifically an arts project, and it's actually been quite vibrant and not, I wouldn't say an interruption to the space around it. I'm speaking to Vermont. Maybe you can speak more about Long Beach. LB-SAC?
We do have a kiln at the Senior Arts Colony in Long Beach, and the work areas are just very large open studios, and they're very flexible. So someone can produce pottery, their artwork can be stored in a locker area, and folks, they sometimes will have a model, and folks will paint, and they're very flexible spaces, and they're always in use, which is really exciting, and produce a lot of artwork. So we think it's very appropriate to have this facility here because on Maryland you do have the Arts District, and we think this will be a strong neighbor that will help support the activity that's happening just a few blocks away.
Thank you.
I have a couple of quick questions. Are these rental units or they are ownership units?
Yeah, rental.
They're rentals. And they are not live work units. They are strictly residential, but they have a space that they can work if they choose to. There's a space in the facility that if they want to create an art or what have you, or work on their projects, they can do that as well.
Right, right.
Okay.
And then there are some opportunities for residents, because many residents will work in those studio spaces or want to work in their own spaces, where we'll have doors that open up and they can work on their own private terraces if they would like to work outside.
Okay.
Is there a tie between the residences and the artist and the art space? Or the artists can either live and reside there or they'd come in from the outside? What's the philosophy there?
Well, I think what we're interested in, you might want to speak more about it, but the gallery space that's on the ground level here in the image, we see that gallery space having multiple opportunities. It could show the work of the artists within the facility. It could also be a programming space for the Y to encourage the arts. Some of the instructors that would be working with the artists within this facility might have programs down there for the Y folks, and we could also see that facility potentially be available for the greater artist community to show off, to have art exhibits and other events. So I don't think we have a program tied down exactly, but I think we're very open to seeing multiple events happening there that aren't just from the artists themselves that reside there.
I'm sorry.
No, speak.
Oh, okay. I didn't want to, because I already spoke. Anybody?
Speak.
Okay. Speak. I'm just curious, does anybody from Glendale, is this Glendale-centric, or when you have a colony like this, do you try to attract from a very large area to bring, new people in, or how does one recruit residents for something like this?
Good evening. My name is Peter Zovak. I'm the Deputy Director of Housing. If I can just answer a couple of questions. This is still a proposal. There's a long way to go in continuing to work with the YMCA on the details, finer details of this proposal. Then there is a consideration by the City Council for a final funding commitment, which hasn't taken place yet. We do expect to go before them within the next 2 months. Then there's an application process at the State of California to request that they fund the bulk of the development. So it is not anything that is ready to break ground anytime soon. So as a result, there are a number of different elements we continue to discuss and refine. Your earlier question about the types of artists, that's a discussion we've had, and we're going to continue to have. There are a number of uses or types of artists that fit this type of residential setting. There are some artist concepts that don't. Industrial welding, torches, things like that, heavy metal type of uses may not be the most appropriate in this residential setting. So we still need to discuss the types of artists that would be appropriate. We do have a beginning working definition. We continue to refine it, and that would be a discussion we would be having with the City Council when they were to consider it as a final proposal. In terms of the actual preference of the second question, with regards to, is the artist calling an internal colony, or is it an opportunity to work outside of just the building itself? And we envision it being both an internal working group, but because of the gallery space that was mentioned, to have them work with the external group as well, who may not be living there, but are artists that do want to have displays, do want to use the gallery, and the development working with the city, the Arts Commission, and any other group in having that gallery made available to the public certain times during the year. And then to your final question about preference, unfortunately there's not a Glendale preference in the ability for tenants to be selected. Oh, that wasn't the question?
No, I mean, my question wasn't slanted to everybody should be from Glendale. It was more a general question about recruiting people, and if you reach out into the general greater LA area, or if it does select people from Glendale with no prejudice in one direction or the other.
We don't have the preference to be able, because it's a state-funded, would be a majority state-funded project, and it'd be affordable income. The criteria would be that anyone who lives there would have to meet the income criteria, lower income. then the preference would go to artists, whether they're already in Glendale or outside of Glendale. That would be it.
So I guess my thoughts are that, Jay, as you mentioned, I think this project is going into an area that is difficult, I think, as you said, because there are a number of buildings with very different architectural styles that surround this. So I think part of the reason this is coming to us is maybe to comment on how we think this particular style of architecture, fits in to what's already there, sitting between two historic buildings. If anybody has any thoughts.
I have a few questions, if I may.
Sure.
From staff. I think the way this project can impact the two historic buildings is the traffic and the parking. I would like to know how many parkings does YMCA have at this time? Because, forgive me for a naive question, because they are providing about 150 parking spaces that is going to go towards YMCA, if I'm not mistaken. That's the way I was reading it. Because with 70 units, also I would like to know what the zoning is in this area that would allow 70 units on a 31,000 square foot lot with 127 parking spaces. Is it SFMU or is it?
No, it's multifamily zoned. I can't remember the exact zone. I can answer the first part. Excuse me, Alan will. Yeah, it's DSP zone.
Yeah, the zoning, it's within the downtown specific
So
plan,
it's DSP
East
zone, that's
Broadway
what allows
zone.
it. I think my concern would be the parking. If how many parkings do we have for YMCA right now?
I don't have those numbers. The architect can share that with you, but I can share on the YMCA's interest in this project. Parking is the number one problem that the YMCA has currently.
Yes.
And part of the reason they are interested in this project is so that they can better serve their members through additional parking and better parking. The YMCA will be a financial partner in this project and will receive a certain amount of money that comes back into the YMCA, funding stream. And there's an expectation that not only through the landscaping that we're going to see that will enhance the historic building, that other additional monies that come to the Y through the project will be available for other upgrades and changes to the building or just for ongoing maintenance. And for us, we see that as a strong reason that at staff level, we think this is a very good kind of symbiotic relationship between this project and a historic building that will get a direct benefit from having this built. But in terms of specific parking, we'll let Michael answer that.
There are currently 108 parking stalls on the site. Some of those stalls are being used by the apartment residents, and then the parking isn't secured, so the general public can park in there even though they're not supposed to. In the new scenario, you're correct, we'll have 150 stalls. There'll be an armed gate so that a Y member would have to put a card up to get in, and so there is an increase, obviously, of 42 stalls. But then we also will not have any housing, any residents using those stalls. And like I said, the current residential buildings do use those 108 stalls. So the Y will benefit dramatically more, and that has been their number one concern.
Right. I think that would be one of my concerns as far as the parking goes, because I know how tough it is. My mom goes to YMCA every morning. Mm-hmm. She's 77. God bless her. But I think that would take care of that parking issue, except the residents, they have 127 spaces? Okay.
And those are gated separately.
So it's not a shared parking?
No.
Okay.
No.
I think that was one of my major questions. And the other one is, during this process, I think it would be very helpful if you have a view of, if I stand on Broadway, on the south side of Broadway, on the sidewalk, and look at the post office, how would this project behind it, which is 65 feet tall, will look from that angle? Because driving, people don't look around and look at this building. But if you're walking on Broadway, on the south side of Broadway, looking north towards the post office, how would this building, would that overpower the post office, or it's sitting? I understand that it steps back tremendously. I just wanted to, I think that would be one of the studies that I would recommend to be done while you're going through this process. I know it's on the early stages, so these two would be my main suggestions, friendly suggestions, not concerns, but I think at this point it's early enough that you're going through a long process, and I think it's a noble thing to do for artists to have an affordable housing and live in downtown area, and which is close to art district. Those are my comments, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I know you're going to want to close the public hearing eventually. I'm just curious, personally, obviously with a building like the YMCA building, which has a very distinctive style, we want to respect that. And how do you see the property that you're proposing to build kind of deferring or honoring the building? Like, it's very hard. I love contemporary architecture, and I'm not against juxtaposing historic architecture and contemporary architecture, but how the new architecture kind of defers, not necessarily mimics, but at least somehow honors or blends or, bows its head to what's next door is, that there's like little subtle things that are done. So could you describe, what those might be?
Sure. First of all, we stepped the massing back. Most of the building is 72, when it's 72 feet high, it's fronting Kenwood or coming towards the parking lot a certain distance. In fact, you can see it here. The taller building is really set back, and then the white building that becomes the third face of this courtyard is 2 floors lower, or 18 feet lower. And you can see the height of it respects the height of the, I believe, a 1960s building,
right,
the Y there.
Other Y building.
And then, unfortunately, we did have the SRO, the historic Y on this side, and at that corner, in one of the previous shots I had shown you, it's very boxy, and it's 36 feet high. So when you look at these three, they talk to each other by all three of them being kind of square and boxy and the same height. We didn't want to try to mimic the historic Y because we couldn't afford to do it in a gracious manner, nor did we want to copy the building to the south.
Yeah,
wanted.
I totally understand that, and I'm glad that you're saying that.
So what we thought is that the trellised element, the landscaping, kind of binds the three buildings together, and then that they're three buildings of different times. The historic Y is early 20th century.
Right.
The one across the way is late 20th century, and ours is early 21st century.
Okay.
And that's very common in many older cities to have this
Our
layering.
Civic Center has that kind of conversation going.
It's a very good point.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for that question, because that was also sort of where I was going with, how are we sort of giving a nod to what's already there? We're doing it more in terms of massing and scale as opposed to any real motifs or details. Okay, we didn't officially open a public hearing, so I don't think there's a public hearing.
Unless you have comments from the public?
No, I have no cards.
Okay. So we really I've taken notes on all of your thoughts. I think the idea of looking at a rendering from the south over the top of the post office seemed to get fairly unanimous interest, and we'll work with the design team to see if that's something we can look at. In general, in any kind of urban setting, we expect development that's going to be adjacent to historic structures. That's just how it works. And if you think of the Masonic Temple, which was built expecting to have similar buildings built next to it, but that just never happened. You have these kind of conditions that arise that are, just varied from site to site and case to case. When we look at designs like this, we focus on issues of massing and window and wall ratio and just general scale issues. And, of course, we're open to the new design, as Michael mentioned, and look at it as this great continuum. But I think looking carefully at that relationship will hopefully help us understand the impact of the design better.
Yeah, I think the approach for a very challenging site and very different architectural styles over the years is the right approach. to make it so different and also kind of show the three generations of buildings. I appreciate what we've done with the massing and scaling because I think that is appropriate, stepping down and being sensitive to the neighboring buildings. I like the passageways that you're trying to connect through greenery and outdoor garden space from Louise into the gallery and back and forth kind of between the YMCA. I'd offer one other comment just for maybe exploration would be the color palette. The new building is very colorful and many different, palettes going on. It might be an opportunity, even in very subtle ways, to tie in some of the surrounding buildings. As I drove by, I noticed, even the YMCA on the corner has kind of a greenish or aqua pink color on the bottom window frames and then different colors above. I noticed you have some very colorful sculptures, which are, I'm sure, just representative at this time. But it might be a way for you to really see how could the color palette, even in trim or windows or doors from both YMCA buildings and the new property and sculpture in the garden, how are those at least talking to each other so it's not so strikingly unique and different and so colorful. And again, maybe just the colors shown here today are just really representative at this time, but maybe just something to think about as you develop the project further.
I think it's fun thinking of this along with Brand Library, where we also have three generations in proximity, so this will be another good example.
Yeah, if I may, actually, if you imagine also on the other side of Kenwood is the fantastic Jetsons-style church. I mean, when we first started working with Michael, which actually also has a Gothic kind of component of it, too. When we first started working with Michael, he asked me what we thought about style. I said, well, this site is virtually a textbook of all the different styles architecture you could imagine in a downtown.
You could do a walking tour just on one block.
Yeah, you stand one spot and on the roof and see everything.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, with that, we'll move back up to 7B.
Okay.
Old business, which is 1411 North Central, discussion of potential Mills Act condition regarding existing wall hooks.
From the major to the minor. Last month, the commission looked at this beautiful property at 1411 North Central and considered it for the Glendale Register and voted to recommend that City Council designate the property. And in our discussion of potential Mills Act conditions, of which there were several, there was some question about the area over this window here, next to the rotunda, and then the two windows that kind of run down this street facade facing Central. And Commissioner Vidor asked, what are those hooks? And so we didn't want to make any decision in terms of should they stay or should they go as a condition until we did a little more research. And so we went to the site and we looked at the hooks. And if you remember, this house is designed by Ben Sherwood, who did the storybook houses in Los Feliz at Silver Lake, and then also did the house at 1345 Cordova that's already on the register. So when we looked at these hooks, we saw that they're painted to match the house. They look like they did once hold something. And we noticed there's one missing here, and then there are two more hooks behind these palms over here, or whatever that plant is. We can't really see those, but we can see they're in place when we're there. So we decided to go look at Ben Sherwood's house on Cordova, since we had an example from the architect, and we said, wait a second, look, those are, we have similar situation there. And then when we looked up closely, we saw that these brackets on the Cordova house are exactly the same as the brackets on 1411 North Central. So we realized that these were intended to be exterior drapery curtain rods. Whether they ever had drapes on them or not, we have no idea. But looking at this house, they're a nice design element. They kind of balance some of the ironwork. We can suppose, because these are on both houses, that the brackets are original. I don't know that these rods or these finials at the end are original, but they certainly look appropriate to the house. So staff's recommendation for the Mills Act condition for North Central would be to repair these brackets, replace the bracket that's missing, paint them to match the existing black ironwork, and then to ask the owner, as a Mills Act condition, to place drapery rods with some sort of decorative end treatment on these 3 windows. And it's interesting because both houses, you can't see it, but on the window over here, on the return next to the door, there's another window with the same treatment. So both houses have 3 windows with this, and so that would be staff's recommendation to finalize the Mills Act condition.
I support that.
Do too.
Fabulous.
We'll actually need you to vote on that
Yes.
since it's a condition.
okay.
so.
So I would make a motion to approve staff's recommendations to repair, restore the ironwork on 1411 North Central as part of the Mills Act and add the drapery rod that's missing.
Yeah, I second that.
Okay. Commissioner Shier,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor,
Yes.
Commissioner Garpetian,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Madam Chair Vartanian.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Good. And we already talked to the owner and said that staff was going in this direction, and she's interested in doing it, so I think
Good.
it's looking good.
Thank you for checking that.
It was fun.
That was a
Did
great,
good.
I know, great that we
like,
had
whoa,
that
they're
resource.
exactly the same.
Yeah. Okay, next item is number 8, new business. Oh, and we have none,
No new
sorry.
business.
So we'll move on to 9B, HPC Year in Review 2013.
And this is where we've done this for the last few years, once in a more big public forum, and we decided to scale it back after that experience. But we do want to remember some of the highlights of designations and Mills Act issues over the last year, to remind the Commission and the public of, how there's, active ongoing interest in the Glendale Register in protecting resources and in using the Mills Act as a tool to help people recognize that there's, obligations to historic home ownership, especially of a lot of the houses that we see on the register that will require ongoing maintenance that will benefit from the Mills Act. So in capping the year, the Commission reviewed 9 properties, voting to recommend 8 of those properties. 7 of those were authorized to have Mills Act contracts, and it's only 7 instead of 8 because the building we're sitting in is one of those 8, and obviously the city can't benefit from a Mills Act contract. We had 1 denial this year for a house that the Commission didn't think met the criteria for designation, and then we had 1 nomination that came through staff, and we got to the point of bringing it to the Commission, and the owner withdrew because after we inspected the site, what we thought was wood siding on a Colonial Revival was actually a metal siding product, and we told the owner that we would then be we would recommend that the Commission put a Mills Act condition that not only the siding, but there are also issues with the windows. A fairly substantial amount of work would have to be done, and even when that was done, we weren't sure that we could say that the house would have material integrity, that the Commission would support a designation, although that would be a possibility, but the owner chose to withdraw the nomination. In the year, we also took those 8 properties to City Council, and so Council voted, I believe, not in all cases, but City Council voted to designate all of the properties and also to authorize the Mills Act contracts. And we just got the Mills Act contracts for 5 of the properties back from the assessor's office, and 2 more we should get in the next week or so. And then we begin our process of working with the assessor to get them reassessed. We have to share the contracts with the State Historic Preservation Office, which just keeps a file of all of our Mills Act properties. And then, of course, we share the contracts with the owners and talk to them about their obligations going forward under the contracts. As the Commission knows, we often put conditions on those contracts with the timeline. So the item on the agenda after this will look at the Mills Act conditions that came due at the end of last year, and we'll let you know where things stand as far as previous conditions go. But just for a recap, we have the Spanish Colonial at 1753 Hillcrest as Glendale Register number 97. This is the house you might remember that will come back to the Commission sometime in the near future for a new garage to be built and for this aluminum carport to be removed. This is 1471 Royal, which was designated under 2 criteria because it was the home of Paul Burkhardt, former council member and significant business leader, as well as neighbor of Commissioner Morgan's family.
He was, yes.
And it was designed by his son, Paul Burkhardt Jr. And this is the first house we have in this kind of very stripped down, kind of late modern style. And it had a lot of interesting, subtle details that the commission found of interest, and city council agreed. This is the house at 1050 Hillcroft, Spanish colonial. This is the one you might remember that has the stairway on the back that covers an arcade. City council, when they heard this, we presented that as kind of, there was a split vote on the commission, so we wanted to make sure council understood that, not everything that comes to them is a unanimous HPC vote. But they looked at the other aspects of the house and felt that it was of high enough quality to put on the register. Number 100, of course, exciting round number, triple digits for municipal services building, qualifying under 3 criteria, including number 1, which is a rare criterion for us to incorporate, but because it represented so much about what Glendale thought of itself as it was moving into the future,
That's right.
It was significant for kind of the concept of building this building as well as for the building itself, and then also for its association with significant architects. Number 101 was the Tudor Revival House on Cumberland Road at 611. And I think the commission looked at this and felt it was interesting because it looks like a building from 1 or 2 decades earlier, but it was built in 1950. But it has a lot of the detailing and design level of buildings from the 20s and 30s. Property 102 is 1440 North Maryland, one of our Mediterranean revival style properties, and we don't have a lot of those right now in the register, so this was a welcome addition, designated for the quality of its architecture. And, of course, the Brockman House in Brockmont Park, the namesake house for Brockmont Park, and one of the grandest houses ever built in the city, qualifying under 4 criteria. So I'd say that's as much as we can ever expect. And property 104 was this very interesting house that is now Colonial Revival. We're not sure exactly what it was in the old days, but we do have, we believe and fairly well know that it was built in the 19th century, so it's just one of our rare early examples of Glendale architecture. So those are the properties that were designated by the commission and council, and we wanted to share those with you.
I think we had a good year.
Nice year.
Congratulations, commissioners.
Thank you for
did
that.
good.
And we're off to a good start. We already have 2 nominations, one that will be going to city council this year that you approved last month, and then we have a new nomination that will probably come to you in February.
Great.
And we'll see where the rest of the year goes.
Off we go. Next is 9C, overview of Mills Act condition fulfillment.
Okay, this is something we've been trying to do for the last few years, particularly as the commission has been placing more conditions on Mills Act properties. And I think it's important when you're visiting sites, and I think everyone on the dais knows, to look for things that we haven't mentioned in our staff report, because there are often small details or even big details that we don't think of as Mills Act conditions, but we want the commission to know that it's important when the city is saying, yes, we think your house is important, but in return for that, we expect you to be maintaining it at a certain level. And that's an ongoing commitment on the owner's part, but there may be significant aspects that need to be corrected immediately that would be seen as a condition. If they're not corrected, it would jeopardize the Mills Act contract. So I wanted to share some of the issues that came due on December 31st, 2013, including the skylights at the rear patio cover of this Tudor Revival on Imperial Drive. On the left, we have the kind of bubble skylights, and those were replaced. These had kind of a metal, kind of a metallic silver galvanized type finish around them. The owners took those out and found a flat skylight, which was what the commission recommended, and painted the edges brown to kind of match the overall color scheme of the house. I didn't put a picture in, but I think you probably remember that these really did jump out at you when you were looking at it from the back of the house. So this I would rate a successful change. At 1220 Cortez, we had a series of Mills Act conditions on this property, and this was the final one that was due at the end of this year. And this is a property where we granted a couple of extensions along the way, which at staff level we feel comfortable when we're working with owners in good faith and recognize that some things may take longer or require more time or more money. We'll definitely extend deadlines if we feel that we're working with people who are going to honor the deadlines. And this was a simple project at the back pool house to install a new cabinet that was based on early photographs of the cabinet that had been there earlier. We included a few other pictures of this property to show some of the changes that were made that weren't necessarily Mills Act conditions, but that just show the level of care that our property owners are taking when they do new design on properties. Here's the pool that was clad with non-original tile and was pretty rough shape. The new work on the right. So all of this was approved at staff level, and because it met the Secretary of the Interior standards and met the goals and the stylistic requirements of the property. New paving was installed. The flagstones were removed. New terracotta pavers were installed in several locations around the pool. And then this was interesting because this came up not as a requirement of the commission and not because of the desire of the property owner, but because of the other work that was going on. There were building and safety requirements that kicked in that required some fencing, and so we worked with the owner to find fencing details that matched the other ironwork on the house and came up with what we think is a really successful solution for this. And I believe we showed this last year. I think this came due. There were a series, but we wanted to put it in again because it's a beautiful fish fountain, and then it looks good. So, if you remember, here's the house we just looked at with the drapery rods. When the commission visited this house, at least several of you noticed that there was a significant amount of water damage as you walked up the stairway. Much of this stairway is kind of subterranean. This is that interesting kind of curving stair that goes up the hill toward the house. The owner removed the damaged stucco, installed some waterproofing membranes behind these areas, and then rebuilt the walls and replaced the stucco. And it looks like, only time tells on projects like this, but it looks like the project was done well and should hold up. But this condition where you just have these masonry walls with stucco cladding that are completely below grade, something may happen again, and that's where the Mills Act will kick in, and we'll work on this as needed in the future. I'm moving now into, I can't remember how these are organized. So this is a property that has received an extension from staff, and this was the McCall's house on Royal Boulevard, the French Revival house. And if you remember, the original roof had been removed from the garage in an earlier kind of remodeling in the 60s. That was actually done by Claire Earle, the architect of the Daly House up in North Glendale. And so he kind of modernized the look of the garage. The commission thought that because we had pictures of the original garage, that it would be nice to restore the roof. The owners agreed and wanted to do that. But because of just the extent of this work, we've granted one extension already from last year that came due at the end of, I guess it was from 2012. The extension was through the end of 2013. And then the owners are currently in plan check on this, and so we granted an extension that will last through June, just so that we think their goal is to get the work done by spring, actually. So next year we'll hopefully see the new roof on this project. Yeah, these are a little out of order for that. This is the property on Hillcroft that we just saw that was designated last year. There had been a jalousie window in this opening. This is the little pergola over here. Not the pergola, the, what's it called, the loggia. And so the owner had new wood windows crafted for that opening that matched the details of the other windows. And that was the only condition that was put on this property.
There was actually one other window on that property in the back. Back stairwell,
There?
very north, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
It was another non-original window.
On the back
jealousy.
stairway at the lower level?
We're facing
or?
the back facade, the very far left.
Okay.
You'd have to go up that really tight little stairway, and there's one small window, as I recall, that we'd also requested.
And did we make that a condition? Okay, to be fair to the owner, I'll go back and listen to the tape
Yeah.
and make sure that we did, but I don't think we caught that. So the far left rear facade on the winding stair.
Yeah, I think as you
Jealousy.
enter that little stair area, it was either straight ahead or to your right.
It's a small jealousy, small
Yeah.
opening? Okay.
Narrow but tall, as I recall.
Okay. I misspoke.
I could be completely wrong, but you can check.
I just
We'll
remember it
see.
being in a very tight
What I'll
Two
do
that
is I'll
one of the staff hadn't seen, but I thought we put that into the conditions.
okay. I'll review the tape. I don't think we could hold. Obviously, it didn't make
Yeah.
its way into the condition as written into the Mills Act contract. We'll talk to the owner and try to make that happen, assuming it came up. So, and then I'll update you next month to let you know where that goes. Okay. This is 2990 Edgewick. There was a condition that the house be painted, which was fulfilled as of last year. I haven't been able to get in touch with the owner. We had some preliminary discussions about what will happen to this wall, and as far as I know, nothing has happened as of yet. But I'll try to get in touch with the owner, and what we'll do, since they are now officially past due, we'll see if we can work out an agreement for possibly a 6-month extension if the commission is open to that. Or what I could do is talk to the owner and then bring back just let you know what kind of agreement we've come up with. We generally try to be fair, like I said, when we know we're working in good faith. This is the house at 804 West Kenneth, and this house is actually a problem because we have tried to reach the owner and have not been able to make contact, which, when I remember from the time of designation, there was a lot going on and it was often hard. But
Did this house sell? Is that why?
I don't believe so.
Didn't.
Do you not? Yeah, we heard that it hadn't sold, and so we're still trying to reach the current, who we believe is the current owner. And what we'll do, we've just been leaving messages at this point. My thought is to leave one more message and say that we'll be issuing a letter, a formal letter, if we haven't heard anything, and. In the early stages, we probably won't be too threatening, but we'll definitely move toward ramping up if we need to. The conditions for this house were the removal of some metal awnings, which is a relatively modest undertaking, and the restoration of a fountain, which we heard that had been already restored. So if that's the case, and maybe the awnings have also been taken off, maybe it's done, and we just haven't gotten confirmation of that. So. We'll do our best to track that down. And then finally, 403 South Central was given a couple of years to do a number of projects, the most dramatic of which would be scraping the paint off these windows, restoring the glass, so we have the contrast between the window openings and the concrete walls, putting in new display windows, which I think I told the Commission wasn't one of the Commission's Mills Act conditions, but actually came from Council. So Council wanted to see the two street front windows look more like the windows in the historic photograph. I've met on site with the owners and the window company about the windows specifically, and we also approved a new sign, which was one of the conditions to remove the vinyl sign that was there. So they've proposed a painted metal sign that will be applied directly to the wall. And what they're saying is that when they do the sign, which is going to require a lift or a scaffold drop, to put that up, that's the time they're going to do the windows and kind of get the rest of the work. I've given them a very limited 3-month extension to the end of March to get this done, partly because they didn't approach us until very late in their 2-year condition window. So we want to make sure that they're moving forward to take care of these things. There were a few other conditions that were relatively minor. I think that's it. That was end of our conditions for tonight. So,
Thank you.
unless we missed any others.
Always nice to look at those designated properties again. Okay, 9D is discussion of CLG required training opportunities for HPC commissioners.
And this is just as a reminder to the commissioners, over many years, and certainly recent years since I've been here, we haven't diligently offered training sessions for the commissioners. We've had a few over the last few years, but we haven't made sure that every year you're fulfilling our city's requirement under the Certified Local Government Program of the State Preservation Office to have commissioners undergo training on a yearly basis on topics relevant to the items discussed by the commission. So what I'm going to do is start sharing everything that I get that's a possible training thing, and hopefully by the middle of the year, we'll know which trainings you guys, the commission has participated in, and then we'll be able to report that back on our annual CLG report. If it looks like we're having trouble, we could certainly look at the second half of the year to possibly do an in-house training of some sort. But what I think would be nice to kind of have commissioners participating in public trainings. So to that end, we're sharing when the California Preservation Foundation has webinars. So I've shared the upcoming webinar on the 21st with all of you. Commissioner Garpetian is committed to that in this room, and staff will also be joining, so we're turning it into kind of a brown bag lunch event.
That's what I was going to ask, the most important part, the lunch.
Yeah, and you're catering, right?
Yes.
Cater your own lunch.
I was just going to ask.
We're not catering, unfortunately.
I must have missed that. January 21st?
Yeah, so
okay.
January 21st at noon, we're going to set this room up just to project the webinar. It's on design review in historic districts primarily, but focusing on design review. Unfortunately, we can only have two of you sitting in this room for that training because of the Brown Act. So we have one slot open. If anyone wants to volunteer for that, first come, first served. And then it's also available for $40 to members of the public who are members. Actually, the member price and non-member price is the same for this, $40, and then you can watch it from home or wherever, from work or wherever you are. There'll be other webinars over the year, and so I think and there's also a training that the SHPO has put together, which is some sort of online training. I haven't looked at it yet. So I think between all these resources, we should be able to fulfill our commitment for trainings and hopefully raise the body of knowledge. So.
And I'm sorry, did you mention, is it a certain number of hours or a certain number of seminars?
No, it's a 1 day, 2 hour webinar. I'm a little suspicious. They usually do 1 hour webinars, and they usually try to make it a lunchtime thing. So as far as I know, it's from 12 to 2.
I'm sorry. I meant for us to fulfill our requirements.
They don't have an official.
They just want to see that
They want to know that you're
some
actively
ongoing.
interested
Okay.
in learning, basically. So
We are.
that's it.
Okay.
So I'll do my best, and we'll do our best to make sure you know about everything that we know that's available out there. It would be great if you could let us know when you've done things, whether we've talked to you about it or you just find something interesting. The one caveat is going on a house tour or going to a museum doesn't count. It has to be kind of a more formal training environment.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right?
So we have one more slot available for that day.
One more slot. So let me know.
Yeah,
I
no,
invite
I'm just
Commissioner Morgan for lunch, I guess. No, I'm just kidding.
I need to check my calendar, but if you want to take it, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, so with that, I think we'll adjourn in memory or honoree of Piedad
Yorba
del Sol. Okay. Thank you.
No singing?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Pieda. Happy birthday to you.
That was very good.
Now, if somebody's TV breaks.
Thank you for that.